Today we are going to talk more about some of the hyperlinks that were in the article that appeared in the Ogden Standard Examiner on October 22nd, 2021. The name of that article is Claims of Utah Groups' Involvement in Child Exploitation Investigations Under Scrutiny. I read the article yesterday. I also found something very interesting when I was researching the Vice article, and I posted a video about that. One of the sources for the Vice article, I didn't finish reading all of the Vice articles, but one of them went on a mission in 2014 with Operation Underground Railroad, and she subsequently wrote in her blog about how good the experience was, and she encouraged people to donate to O.U.R. That was in 2015. So she writes about O.U.R. twice in her blog, once in 2014. As far as I can see, she wasn't posting a lot back then, but I do know that this lady was trying to build her presence online as a writer at the time. She refers to herself as a mommy blogger or a former mommy blogger. And that tells me that she was trying to get some publicity and clout and grow her website. I used to be a freelance writer. That's really hard to do, to get your name out there. But if you get connected with the right people, then you can get lots of assignments and make a little bit more money. And then you can write your own stuff without having to be under the thumb of someone who is telling you what to write. But here's the thing. None of that is being disclosed in the Vice article. I don't see anywhere where she's saying, well, I went and at the time I thought it was good and, I was supportive of it, and then something changed. So once again, the question is, what changed? Was it her or O.U.R.? Did she start to view it in a different way because her viewpoint shifted? I think that that's a fair question, but also it is irresponsible for other outlets to use that Vice article without doing the research on her and finding out that at one point she was very supportive of O.U.R. and then asking the question, well, what happened? The other day, a Mormon Stories podcast came out, and host John DeLynn had a bunch of people who they claim to be reporters from Vice, and then he had Lynn Packer on there, and he had Damian Moore, who runs the American Crime Journal website. But in the comments, when people were asking for sources, they were being referred to the Vice article that contains the information from Meg Conley. That's fine, but don't you have to disclose the fact that Meg was on board at some point for people to get a full picture of what's going on? Well, of course they don't. But this is my problem. People who supported O.U.R., some of them have decided that they don't support it. And I'm not saying that some of them do not have legitimate complaints. Anyone who's worked anywhere knows that some people have a good experience, some people have a terrible experience. But the question is, are these people changing their minds because of something that Operation Underground Railroad did, or are they changing their minds because something that is common here is, as I explained in a previous video, we'll have people who are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they'll decide that they don't want to be part of that church anymore, and they change every single thing about themselves. So anything that the church stands for, they have to be against. So is that what happened to some of these people? Did they just decide, you know what, this is a white savior syndrome or whatever? Did they decide that and then decide, well, then that makes Operation Underground Railroad bad? If you're going to share this information, you need to make sure that you're providing the audience with a full picture. Explain what happened. Why did you change your opinion of this organization? Okay, so let's look at some of these hyperlinks. So there's one hyperlink that leads to the Pierce County Operation Daycare article, and it says Pierce County Operation Daycare leads to 4 arrests. Now, if you read through the article, it's curious that this particular one would be connected to the article in the Ogden Standard Examiner because it does mention the NANNY operations. It says that, but this is actually an announcement for Operation Daycare. It is not about the NANNY operations. Instead, all it says about that is similar to the 18 net NANNY operations, which have netted a total of 292 arrests and rescued more than 31 children across the state since 2015. Operation Daycare was a condensed version with fewer officers over a shorter period of time. So right here, my question is, why did you link to this article? Because it has nothing to do with the nanny sting. Yes, it does mention it, but it would be better if we had more of a direct source, but we don't. So let's move on, because that one honestly doesn't have anything else to do with the Ogden Standard Examiner article. Let's move on to the Spokesman Review. And this is the article that is hyperlinked in the article in the Standard. I'm going to refresh you what it says in the Standard. When asked about OUR's partnership with the Washington State Patrol, a spokesman for the state agency, told the Spokesman Review in May that, quote, it became increasingly apparent that OUR needed us more than we needed them, and they were using our success in the promotion of their activities, end quote. Okay, so let's go to the actual article and find that section. So this article is titled Lawsuit, State Operation to Catch Sex Offenders and Trapped Innocent Men to Boost Arrest Numbers. Okay, I I don't agree with that title. And it was published on May 2nd, 2021. So it's written by Maggie Quinlan. Starting off, we already are assuming that law enforcement agencies did something nefarious, even though we have the message that the guy who the charges were eventually dropped for responded to. I think it was reasonable to at least arrest him and find out what was going on. But it appears that the writer of this article does not think so. Instead, they interview men who say that they were entrapped. And when they ask the men, if you showed up and there was a child, what would you have done? And the men say, no, I would have left if it was a child. So I guess that the reporter is just automatically believing that to be true. One of the gentlemen that they discussed in the article, he actually was convicted. His conviction was eventually overturned. And the reason was because they said there was no victim. So he responded to a message as well, where the person said that they were 13. And then he says, oh, do you mean 23? But he still shows up. So, I mean, is that not a problem? Well, apparently, I guess some people think not. But anyway, let's go down to the section of the article where we talk about O.U.R. Quote, of the roughly 300 people arrested in online predator stings in Washington from 2015 to 2020, about a quarter were under 25. The Times found with data from Washington State Patrol and court records, in 89% of cases, there was no evidence suspects had child porn in their possession, and 92 had no history of violent crime. They were sentenced on average to 6 years in prison, the Times reported. Hambrick was sentenced to 13 months to life in prison with a minimum of 10 years as a registered sex offender. Though Parker's charges were dropped, the lawsuit claims Washington State Patrol and a nonprofit they partnered with continued to slander him as a child predator. Operation Underground Railroad, a nonprofit that donated thousands to Washington State Patrol to fund net nanny operations when they began in 2016, published a news release naming Parker as one of the 22 dangerous sexual predators who targeted children. The news release on the nonprofit site indicates it was written by Washington State Patrol and includes logos from Operation Underground Railroad and Washington State Patrol side by side. Quote, let's stop there and just look at what's said. So this acknowledges that the press release was written by Washington State Patrol, and while it has OUR's logo next to Washington State Patrol, OUR does not say that they were there. So all they did was just release, hey, some more predators are off the street. And that's what the press release has on it. I actually will pin it in below, but I'll read it as well. So here we go. April 22nd, 2021. Press release. Washington State Patrol. Thurston County. 22 dangerous sexual predators who targeted children in Thurston County were removed from the streets thanks to a multi-day operation run by the Washington State Patrol and several partner agencies. Dubbed Operation NANNY, this is the 15th operation spearheaded by WSP's Missing and Exploited Children's Task Force an Internet Crimes Against Children affiliate. Since the original operation in August 2015, MECTF has netted a total of 246 arrests and rescued more than 30 children across the state. MECTF's primary mission is to proactively target those persons involved in child abuse and child exploitation via the internet. While the internet is a powerful tool for our nation, criminals using it to target our communities necessitates a need for this type of proactive investigations by our law enforcement troopers and partners in order to combat these horrible crimes, says WSP Chief John R. Batistas. This operation is aimed at protecting our vulnerable children and making communities safer, adds Chief Batista. From February 15, 2019 to February 20th, 2019, undercover law enforcement officers used various websites on the internet and phone applications to communicate with people interested in having sex with children. The operation generated hundreds of responses. The would-be perpetrators, who were arrested over the 5-day operation, traveled to meet with the undercover detectives posing as underage girls and boys with the intent to engage in sexual activity with children as young as 6 years old. After that, they have all the names listed. And at the bottom, the guy who was suing, it says, update. The charges were dropped against him. So then it goes on to say, anyone with information related to the suspects listed or information leading to the identity of victims potentially involved in these cases, please contact MECTF at, and then they give their email address. It goes on to say the collaborative effort involved more than 70 dedicated law enforcement officers, agents, and staff led to the success of this operation. The funding for this operation was made possible due in part by the support from the public, as well as a generous donation from Operation Underground Railroad, O.U.R. O.U.R. is a nonprofit 501(c)(3) who shares the mission of law enforcement agencies to save children and see that child predators are arrested and prosecuted. O.U.R. is privileged and honored to partner with our nation's law enforcement heroes in this important cause to combat the sexual exploitation of children in our nation's communities. Okay, here we go. That's what they posted on their website. So once again, they are being clear that they donated money. They did not participate. So that's one thing. Now let's go back to the article in the Spokesman Review that appeared on May 2nd, 2021, about where the author seems to think that the men were entrapped and all that good stuff. Quote, Vice World News, through a series of public records requests, found that while O.U.R. often claims to partner with local law enforcement on trafficking investigations, the extent of each partnership is usually a modest donation. An earlier Vice investigation found that many of the organization's claims are misleading or unverified. In one case, the organization took credit for rescuing a sex trafficking survivor who testified in court that she escaped on her own. Still, the organization has gained acclaim as conspiracies about child sex rings have gathered steam. In 2019, President Donald Trump appointed the nonprofit's founder to co-chair a federal anti-trafficking policy council. Starting in 2016 with donations from the then burgeoning Operation NANNY, Washington State Patrol received about $200,000 over 5 years from O.U.R. before deciding in 2020 to decline further donations from the organization, said Chris Loftus, a spokesman for WSP, in January. Okay, so what exactly does he say? In the early days of a fledgling project, donations were critical and very much appreciated, and we used it to develop the process of the NANNY operations, Loftus said. But over the course of the last year, it became increasingly apparent that O.U.R. needed us more than we needed them, and they were using our success in promotion of their activities. We never had a sense to think that what they were doing was untoward or illegal or unethical. But we have to be careful that as law enforcement, other entities don't borrow our moral and ethical authority granted to us by the public. Okay, makes sense to me. Then it goes on to say the detective who spearheaded Operation NANNY, Carlos Rodriguez, moved to work at Operation Underground Railroad after retiring from WSP. Loftus said it is not uncommon for WSP officers to move to nonprofits after retirement. Rodriguez could not be reached for comment. Operation Underground Railroad spokesman Emily Evans declined to interview. The suit, filed in South Bend, Washington, attorney Harold Karlsvik seeks compensatory damages for Parker and his wife based on several alleged crimes, including illegal arrest, unnecessary force, defamation, malicious prosecution, and abuse of process. Okay, so that's the end of the article. Let's talk about this a little bit. Do you think that a guy the gentleman, he is in the military and he's married, do you think that has anything to do with the lawsuit? Well, of course it does, because now people that they know that he was out looking for sex with somebody else. And then the added horror that maybe it was children. Yeah, of course he's going to sue. But if we look at what O.U.R.'s involvement was in this situation, where's the wrongdoing? They said they gave money. They did give money. Now, Washington State Patrol, of course, if you get sued, you're going to cut ties. You're going to be like, hey, you guys shouldn't have put out that press release. So now we're in trouble for that. So they cut ties. They stopped taking money from them. But did you notice that the detective actually went to work for O.U.R. after he retired? Why did he do that? Well, personally, and I don't know him, I haven't talked to him, but I have to say, I don't feel like this is entrapment if someone responds to a message that indicates that children might be there. If you really were completely against that, you would verify. You'd be like, wait a minute, no, I don't want anything like that. But that doesn't seem to be happening with these gentlemen. So I think that maybe the detective was thinking, hey, we did a good job. We did our job, and now we're being lambasted for it, which seems like what this article is saying that it's like inflating numbers by arresting predators. But just because there's not an active victim in the case, if they're responding to these messages, then shouldn't they be arrested? Shouldn't we be aware that they're out there doing this, prowling around on the internet, responding to messages that indicate that children might be there? I think that's the job of law enforcement, and I'm glad that they're out there doing it. But remember, this was 2021, and around this time, people were screaming that we should defund the police. The way that just the word of these people who were charged is taken, it's like it's law. It seems like the law enforcement agency doesn't even really get a chance to speak about it. It's just like, oh, you entrapped these guys. But we do know that there are child predators out there, or there are people who are willing to satisfy their desires with someone who is underage, if that's who happens to be online. We know that. So why so much scrutiny on the law enforcement agencies? Once again, we're getting into political territory, right? As you may have noticed, it is mentioned that Tim Ballard, he met with Donald Trump. He talked about the border wall. So this has a very left-leaning political slant. And we all know that there is a witch hunt for Donald Trump today. It was announced that he's probably going to get arrested for January 6th. Like, how crazy is that? But in 2021, everybody was pretty sure that, hey, you know what, Donald Trump's probably going to run for 2024. And I think that there's this fear that he might actually get reelected. So even though he was out of office by this time, there's still this desire to make people think, oh, he is always bad. He's bad. You don't want anything to do with him. So, of course, you're going to connect Tim Ballard to Donald Trump because he went and talked to Donald Trump about the border wall and was possibly going to work on a task force to talk about border security. So, of course, you've got to take your article in that direction. You've got to bring up the Vice News article and things like that. It makes me feel like there's a small network of writers who, or at least people who were freelance writing, who were trying to make a little cash or whatever, and they're going to push each other's work. You got this Meg Conley, you got this Maggie Quinlan, this Taylor Hartman. You've got people who are trying to make it in this realm, which is difficult, I wonder if there is a common connection between these people. Could it be church? Maybe. I am going to keep digging on that because I have a theory that 99% of the people who are saying that Operation Underground Railroad is a fraud and Tim Ballard is a liar and everything, I have a theory that 99% of those people are connected through the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in some way. So I'm going to be digging on that. I'll see you in the next one.